All right. I hope you are alive. Hi, my name is Olga Bolotina. I'm a chair of a San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. And we started this series of conversations in the know to put real humans behind the messages that you receive, asks that you receive sometimes. So I think it's important, especially now when we are I would say physically isolating, to keep in touch and also see real humans behind corporations, behind organizations, behind messages. So today I'm very, very excited to introduce to you Chance Cutrano. He is the vice chair of San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club, but that's not all he is. Chance, I got to work with him for the last 3.5 months, right, Chance? And it's been amazing experience. I appreciate Chance's thoughtfulness, his knowledge, his expertise, his diverse interests. So I hope that Chance will share some stories with us today and some wisdom. So Chance Cutrano got his undergraduate in philosophy and political science in St. Xavier in Chicago, right? So we need to trace the voyage to Bay Area from there. I would love to hear the stories. He's also my fellow Presidio Graduate School graduate. He actually received the Master of Political Science. Chance. Yeah, so I got the Master of Business Administration. So I will also discuss, and you did very, very cool project, Fish in the, which looked and sounded amazing. So I want to definitely ask you about those things. Chance also got an award from Sierra Club California Emerging Leaders Award in 2018. For contributions, outstanding contributions to conservation politics by someone under the age of 30. And right now, Chance is working as Director of Programs at the Resource Renewal Institute, where you are leading, Chance, the sustainable agriculture and public lands programs. And I want to give a special shout out to Chance. He's a leader in every sense of this word. Just recently in those COVID crisis, Chance co-organized, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to hear also a little bit more in detail that you were in the news, which was very exciting also for us. He organized help to people who cannot go shopping themselves in Fairfax, Marin County, California. So Chance, without further ado, thank you so much for joining us. Well, me and us. Very excited to chat today. So first, I think I would like to know, the most exciting stories from your childhood that led you to philosophy, political, and then environmental protection. So some nuggets, if you can share.
Sure. So first, thank you, Olga. That was quite the introduction. I appreciate that.
Well deserved.
Yeah, it's you did a lot of research there. No, I'm really happy to be on this, and I love the concept that you've created, because I do think that there are a lot of these giant organizations, and we don't know just how many volunteers and staff members are working on the issues that we care about to create a healthy planet and a more enjoyable environment for all of us to live in. So my childhood, I guess, my background, I'm from South Chicagoland, and I think some of the things that really affected me and carried me through to this point in time were just like the fact that my parents really were about like getting outside. So I was very fortunate, just south of where I grew up is the Kankakee River, which spans from Indiana to Illinois. And it used to be actually part of the largest wetland in the United States until a lot of it was reclaimed and until the Indiana portion was dredged. And so the Illinois portion still is part of the United States scenic rivers. And my father would always encourage us to go on canoeing trips. And as a child, those are some of my fondest memories, is being in the canoe with my parents with packed lunches and stopping on sandbars and having, you know, picnics and collecting rocks and stuff. But they were good about getting me out to, you know, getting out and traveling in general, whether it was to the, you know, up to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and, you know, also to the West Coast. I remember going to, you know, Mount Rushmore, going to Arches, going to the Grand Canyon, on like these massive road trips. And my father was the type of person, and my mother was so supportive of it, where we would just, you know, pull over on the side of the road and jump in a river just to say we've been in that river. And it was just, you know, that I don't know, it's like really just exploration, that theme of exploration of life and enjoyment of life, and like being our best selves, I think. So
any particular things that stood out? And Minda and I last into leisure. I was like, ee. But did you go fishing, or some things that really, you know, pop in your head?
Yeah, I think some of the most interesting things were really the like that swimming in rivers and canoeing piece. Like the connection to water was so huge for my father, who himself moved to California when he after he got out of the Navy. And so, you know, he lived in San Diego and then down in Mexico, and so he was always connected to the ocean and to water. And that he really instilled that in me as well. So that was a huge piece. And just, yeah, I think it's just hiking. I had a couple close run-ins where I like almost, you know, passed away, like life or death moments, like
Passed away.
Yeah. Like as a kid, getting caught in a rip current and going down the river, and my father having to like really, swim for his life.
Fish you out. Fish you out.
Yeah, it was like it was just like a life-changing moment, you know, like that, something like that was affected me greatly. Just understand, like really having a respect for nature, I think. And you know, little things like that can have a big impact on a kid, but so could, like, you know, you know, hiking with, you know, random parties when we went to, when we were in Wyoming or at Yellowstone, or waking up and, you know, we were waking up on the beach in Northern California when Roosevelt elk were walking through our campsite. So like those types of experiences were phenomenal. And I'm really privileged to have those experiences, and it's helped me today for sure.
It's interesting you mentioned I went water rafting, and one time we actually, the boat flipped and we got into the current, into the rapids. That was sobering experience for sure. Everybody got out okay, but to your point, I realized, oh my God, this is so powerful. Nature is, we have very little control when we're one-on-one with it. So it's interesting. But you know, it's interesting you're talking about water experiencing, and then you did. So I'll mention, and maybe jump around a little bit, but Presidio School, graduate school, where you got your, so Presidio, for those who are listening, Presidio Graduate School is a school that concentrates on sustainability and how to integrate sustainability into basically every aspect of our lives. So, and the final project that all graduates are doing is sort of associated with their usually life passion. So, and for you, it was fish in the fields. So it's interesting the connection you're talking about, canoeing and water, and your father who loved water and you did, and now you're working, from what I understand, also a lot with fish. So if you can speak a little bit to the fish in the fields, that sounds like a very cool project.
Yeah, and it wasn't until, I think it's kind of interesting. So we've lost so many wetlands in the world and in the United States and back where I'm from. And it's interesting that I get to work in, temporary wetland ecosystems and like the last remaining habitats for migratory birds in California. Another honor to be able to do that. But yeah, fish in the fields. And we can get into, how my involvement in that work as well, how that arose. But it's essentially the fact that, there are 500,000 acres of rice in California, makes up about 65% of the remaining sort of wetland ecosystems in the Central Valley, which we've lost 95% of over time due to agriculture and development. The work is, in the wintertime, those rice fields are fallowed and they're flooded to provide this habitat for birds along the Pacific Flyway. And one of my mentors and a colleague and a friend of mine, who's also my boss, Huey Johnson, it's like this, environmental titan in U.S. conservation history. And we still work together, fortunately. He was out in a duck blind one day and he thought, we should be able to use these flooded fields for something else. And so he's been on this mission to find beneficial uses for the 500,000 acres of rice that are flooded in the wintertime. And one of those is fish in the fields. It's using those fields for aquaculture to grow fish in the winter months as essentially a second crop for rice farmers. That is also, we've come to find through our research, we're actually fighting climate change, mitigating methane emissions from these temporary wetlands by adding fish back into these former floodplain ecosystems. It's like super nerdy stuff, but it's really, it's
a lot of fun. Well, you know what, and forgive me, I don't know, I see those fields when you drive to Sacramento, right? The huge flooded fields on the mostly, so on the one side, but those fields were naturally so wetlands before all the constructions took place. So we're basically just repeating the natural cycle in more sort of managed way and yielding some profits from it. So is that?
Yeah, that's the hope. When folks started to settle the Central Valley, they were building right up to the banks of the rivers, and some of those, it's the most fertile agricultural land because there's so much sediment that's moving, from the river bottoms and organic detritus matter that's ending up in these fields, and it's making it super fertile soil. But unfortunately, as we know here in California, we're faced with these cyclical El Nino years and La Nina years where there's lots of rain and then there's drought for extended periods of time. And so multiple times throughout history, entire communities have been washed away for building too close to those rivers. And now we've, created these floodplain corridors, which is essentially managed wetlands in the winter months. But rice farms also play an important role in that. It is managed, and I think we're starting to understand the need to reconnect our rivers to allow water to spread out, and all of the myriad benefits that come with that for birds, for fish, and for other animals, and for us for flood control and things like that. So yeah, we're trying to tinker with the way that we live on the land to make it better and more resilient, but it's a work in progress.
It definitely is. So the agricultural aspect that you're working on right now relates to fish and to rice farming also. So you continue that work. Well, it was just some mental note I made, when I was looking at the name of the organization that you're working on for right now, the Resource, help me out.
Renewal Institute.
Renewal, that's right. Renewal Institute. It's like, wouldn't it be wonderful to live in a world where we didn't have to, think about renewing resources, or actually managing them in a way that we didn't deplete them first place. And I think you're right that now we are learning more and more and how nature processes can help us to bring food to our tables. So I want to go back a little bit. How did you make your pilgrimage from Chicago to Bay Area? And it's sort of, I know that there's some story there, so I wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, it's serendipitous is the best way I can describe it. In undergrad, I was very fortunate to do my honors field work, my capstone work in Yellowstone National Park. So I spent a portion of a winter in Yellowstone when there's like no one there, and got to do my research, which was somewhat environmental, but was really about understanding the socioeconomic and the political implications of and effects on wildlife management in Yellowstone National Park and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And so it was all about like understanding how we come up with policies that are not based on science and who benefits and who's exerting power in those systems in order to, kill bison because they threaten ranching communities outside of Yellowstone. And this is an issue that plagues Western public lands. But I came away from that with this capstone project, and I had some time in my undergraduate program where I also got to do some traveling. I did a comparative research program with the International Honors Program through the School for International Training out of Brattleboro, Vermont. And what I did was I went from Chicago to San Francisco, fell in love, and with the Bay Area. It's beautiful.
With the Bay Area.
Yeah, with the Bay Area. One of my loves. And got to go out to Point Reyes National Seashore was my first site visit on this international program, which had implications later in my life. And then I went on from San Francisco to get the Bay Area context, then to Vietnam, Morocco, and Bolivia, looking at food, water, and energy policy and how we manage resources across continents, across different government structures. It was really fascinating. And I met some folks through that program that connected me with Huey Johnson, who I had mentioned earlier at the Resource Renewal Institute. And so I actually was very fortunate that I could send my resume along, months after. I knew I wanted to come back here, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I got my resume to Huey, and he reached out and said, the summer's almost over. If you want to come be a summer fellow or research associate, come on out for the summer. And we'll figure out a project. We didn't discuss what the project was. We didn't discuss pay. We didn't discuss where I was going to live. It was just I had this, just because it was this person and I could get back out to San Francisco, I bought a ticket, and within a week I was out in the Bay Area and living in my office. It was, it turns out I got to the project he wanted me to work on was, assessing the environmental ramifications of public lands ranching here in the Bay Area, which was the perfect fit for what I had essentially, my specific training in undergrad was to analyze the relationship between, wildlife management policy, on public lands, specifically national parks, and that interface with ranching communities and politicians. So it was like a dream, but then with Fish in the Fields, it was like, that was the next step. They're like, we're also starting to work on this other project. And I was like, I just saw fish and rice co-cultivation in Vietnam. I have some contacts in Vietnam, so let me reach out to them and talk. And they were like, who is this guy? You know, it's like, it just was such a perfect fit. And so I've been out here. I didn't know what I was gonna do, and they hired me on full time. And so I've been here for almost 5 years now.
Oh my God, you know what, you're speaking and I'm just catching myself thinking, this is so exciting. I'm so glad we're doing this because I'm learning about you and we've been working for a while and I'm learning so much, there's so much new stuff. And I don't even know where to begin asking you questions because Yellowstone and staying there for how long did you stay? Say you stayed there?
I was there for a couple weeks, 3 weeks or so in the winter.
In the winter. Oh my God, I mean, I've been to Yellowstone. I will literally, drove with my father also, who came to visit here from Russia. We drove to Yellowstone, literally saw the sunset, and it was in the summer. It was absolutely stunning, spectacular. We camped. I had to drive back. We had to drive back the next morning because I had to be at work the following day. So it was just trip. But talking about Yellowstone is just so well worth it because just those glimpses of that astonishing place, I definitely through the suffering, but it was definitely worth it. So are there any lessons that you learned from staying in Yellowstone? You work definitely on the cross section sort of different interests, so there are a lot of potential conflict. So when you work on those, there are some lessons, some sort of reflections. Maybe you can share the most sort of that pop up in your head.
Yeah, I think one of the most formative pieces of that trip was how interdisciplinary a leader, a manager, an analyst, an environmentalist has to be in order to understand the system that you're working in and the system that you hope to influence. And it really was the fact that, through the process of writing my paper and working on that project, it's not simply understanding the relationship between, wildlife and domestic livestock or, the science of it and like, what's the right science for that policy, but it's taking steps back and understand, like situating yourself in the geography of that landscape, the history, the anthropology, how was that land settled, who settled it, and how that carries forward into the policies that have been created and the social structures that have been built around those policies. And it creates a whole culture. And so yet you're working within that culture the entire time. So that's really that was super formative because I had to become like, I had to dig into so much different research that I didn't intend to or didn't expect to. So
did you communicate directly with farmers and with people who live there? And I'm just curious, what did they share that they were the most sort of challenging things for them and for you to solve?
Yeah, so I did. I had the great pleasure and fortune of sitting down with multiple ranchers in their barns, in their homes, sitting down with park staff, sitting down with advocates from the Greater Yellowstone Coalition and the Buffalo Field Campaign. And it was pretty amazing. Sorry.
We're all calling from home,
Yeah, we're all working from home.
But
trying to find our comfort place. Yeah. Yeah, that's Victoria over there.
Hi, Victoria.
You're on live stream. So yeah, so
that's your other love, right?
The other love, the rock in my life that keeps me grounded and stable. Yeah,
Dr. Ranches and
I met with a lot of different folks out there, and that was you get to, it's like a good empathy building exercise, like that's the other piece of this. We're all trying to figure out how to inhabit the same spaces and like figure out how to make it all work. And sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it's like, if you have your environmentalist hat on, you're advocating for certain positions. And like for the long-term resilience and sustainability of a landscape, that's that says a lot, and that's one thing, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And it also takes a lot of courage for anybody from any other seat to also engage with you and like try to work on that. So that was one of the things I was learning about, and I'm still learning about.
Yes, it's also interesting. I see so many parallels, and it's fascinating because, when we spoke with Minda, we work all, very closely together. She also talked, one of her papers was how to have conversations with conservative communities about, science and environment. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the name of the paper exactly, but it was also, it's fascinating to learn those lessons. And really, I think without us putting sort of ourselves in those positions that we sometimes see adversary, I think we cannot really A, effectively advocate, and B, come up with measures and policies that truly solve the problem. Because I think, and let me know if you agree or not, that people have to really agree internally. And if they don't agree internally and really have a buy-in into the solution, I think they might be following the steps, but they might be sort of not rejecting, but feel resentful towards the solution. So
yeah, that's a great point. I find that there's like, it's like some of my heroes are people like Huey, but also like David Brower, and so fitting as a formative person for the Sierra Club. But it's like sometimes you can't compromise, and you shouldn't compromise, and like you have to stand your ground. And conflict, it can be a very healthy thing. And I think a lot of people are afraid of conflict. They love going to the cocktail parties. They love shaking hands. They love being friends. And sometimes when you're trying to protect an old growth forest, or you're trying to protect a wetland that, if destroyed, will never in our lifetime or the lifetime of our children or grandchildren be restored to its former glory. Like some of that stuff is worth fighting for. And it's most of it is, all of it is really, but it's really hard to do that work. It's really hard to do that work. And it's all about like endurance, it's like, you just have to, and you have to know yourself as well. You can't just fake your way through like stakeholder engagement and stuff, because you're not going to get to the outcome that you hope for. So.
Well, you one of the areas that I'm very, very curious about and very dedicate a lot of times to sort of look into is personal development. And I agree with you. And if I understand you correctly, you please elaborate that until you internalize and sort of embody some of the things and some of the qualities, you cannot really bring them into your work. So I'm curious, because I observed you throughout those particularly last, months and a half, 2 months, you've been operating on a high level. You've been helping people. You stay mentally fit, so to speak. So can you share what do you do? I mean, do you have some daily routines? Do you have some reflection, sessions? So what do you do to keep yourself grounded and to be able to have energy to go into community and help?
Yeah. Again, I probably attribute that to some of the strongest contributions my parents have made to me, which is my father was a tireless advocate for various communities. His passion was the families, the Gold Star families who have lost children overseas in armed conflict, being a veteran himself.
Forgive me, Gold Star families are the families that
they've lost children in in armed conflict, in wars and operations, in Iraq, Afghanistan, but, you know, all conflict in the United States. So, you know, he did a lot of work with veterans and for our fallen soldiers. And that was like his calling, to do that, to build a wall. So he ended up building a memorial wall, the first memorial wall ever erected while a conflict was ongoing in the history of the United States. And that was his passion. Like, he did that.
Where was the wall? Where is it?
It's in Illinois. It's called the Middle East Conflicts Wall Memorial. And it has the names of, I think, every fallen soldier since operations in 1979. And still there are names being added, unfortunately, to that wall. And so, like, you know, he was always out there doing it. He was engaging with communities. He was like, by and large, just a great model of what a activist and a caring person can be. And then you have my mother, she is a very compassionate presence in my life. And so those things provided in me the understanding that, like, that's I have to mirror that, and I have to model that in all of the spaces I walk through. And I'm, you know, I'm very privileged, and I think that results in a particular duty and responsibility to make sure that all boats are rising, and that I'm using that privilege to help people in precarious situations. And that's just really part of, like, right sizing my life and doing my part. So doing that, like, those were like the driving functions, and that resulted in cultivating habits. I think a lot of any outcomes are the result of just habits that we formed. And so it's really like, it's not that I want to do anything exceptional ever. It's more, I wake up every day and I think that it's so ordinary, and it's just necessary to be doing some of these things, as necessary as washing the dishes, you know, just being at community meetings, being out with different community groups, and just trying to provide my skill set, my education, my experience, and hoping that can meld with the experiences and education and knowledge systems of other folks, and in order to, like, that we can co-cultivate something that we can be proud of, and something that we can love and cherish and exist in. So.
Wow, that's fascinating. And just how much influence our parents and our upbringing plays into in our life. And a lot of times we sort of educate others by our actions, not by our words. So it seems like your father definitely nurtured that in you. So yes, thank you. Well, and one of those things, how you live your day is how you live your life. So daily habits, and you mentioned daily habits. What are they? If you can just throw a few. Do you meditate? I just want, because right now, especially, such a difficult times for people. So I think that, you know, many of us can benefit from, that might work for me too, to sort of ease my pain or be more joyful, you know, count my blessings. So whatever that is for you, that I would love to know.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things is that, like, I go to work every day, but I also make sure that I'm, you know, if there's a community meeting of any sort, I try to fill my schedule with things to do, and that's been very helpful for me. So, like, I might work, you know, 9 to 5, but then I might be on calls, or I might be at community meetings or at a council meeting or something like that, all the way until, you know, 9, 10 p.m. And then I'll come home and might get back to it, you know. And I also developed a passion for reading in college, which is strange, but I think it came with the philosophy. So I'm constantly reading, and then based on that reading, there's a lot of tinkering with what I'm reading to develop new ideas.
What are you reading? What is your favorite?
Oh my gosh.
Let's just put a genre. What do you feel like the most?
Wow, that's intense.
No, we're not gonna linger here for long.
Yeah,
Just
I think a lot of the stuff that I've been reading is like it's all of an environmental flavor, and I hop around from environmental philosophy to fiction and like historical fiction to nonfiction, but it's all about our relationship with the environment in some capacity. At least that's how I interpret it, but that maybe that's just what I bring to the readings. But it's kind of funny, like all of these books, one second here, I'll show you. Let me move this plant out of the way.
oh wow,
But
nice.
like all of my books, it's like I'm like dog earing, and then I take notes on just about everything that interests me. And so I end up, having this collection of books and then all of these resources that like of things that have a spark for me. Because really it's not that I'm like an analyst or an environmentalist or anything, but like I would consider myself more of an artist. And so I'm trying to figure out how to bring all these different spheres together, because I hate the idea that like you're boxed into something, So lots of reading, lots of taking note of what I'm reading and really sitting on it and thinking and like marinating in it. But the other big piece of that, as I'm still holding this plant, I'll just keep.
It's good.
The other piece of that, if I'm like stressed out, which I'm like free, I have like bouts of dealing with like stress, of course, like everybody, but like I do a lot and I don't talk about it a lot, but it's I do meditate, but in my own way. I have this like I'm not like sitting and counting or something, but I sit and think about problems and just like sit in it and try to make connections, and also let like my id or let some of the more subconscious aspects of myself help me make those connections, because it's like your rational brain can't always do a lot of the work. It has to be that like the other parts of you that just like let it, when you get into a flow.
Yes.
So.
Well, I heard a phrase that caught my attention recently: thinkitate. So meditation, but also when thoughts come to you and you meditate, for you and for people who do meditate, you get into that stage where you sort of, oh my God, this is an amazing thought. I don't want to forget it. And I'm blanking on the name of the person. I'll send the podcast to you. He said that, I have just a notepad by my side, and when the thought comes, I'll write it down, and then I go back into that sort of meditative state. So, and I found it actually also helpful. I do my routine in the morning. I just feel like that just brings so much more groundness to me, and clarity. I'm not quite there. I'm not also meditating for an hour a day or every Sunday, for a whole day, but doing those routines, a little bit of yoga, meditation, breathing exercise has been very, very helpful, especially in those times, and really sticking to every day doing a little bit. And so,
Yeah.
I would, yeah. So I think you actually shared something, reading the book way. I think that's a great tip to ear
Yeah, and of course, it's like some people don't like reading, but I think journaling's helpful. I'm like hellishly organized, so like creating
organized.
Yeah, like creating to-do lists for the week, and then like checking them, like I have like a digital itinerary of all the things I want to do in a week, and then I cross them out through the week, and if there's anything I miss, I carry it to the next week. And I have like a 100-page Word doc of all the activities from the last 2 years that I've been to. So it's just I found I need to keep more of those things as I commit to more things and try to fill up my life, because it's hard to hold it all in here. So journaling and writing out those things is really helpful.
Uh, well, you do both, actually. It's interesting. You do sort of intake, the reading, listening, participating, but you also do the output of, thought process, so you're journaling. So I think that it's also very important to reflect and to also use your own brain for your own ideas. So that's great. And you, again, 100-page document, you give me another idea how to keep track. And also, I think reward system, when you check those boxes, is just it's like, I accomplished that. So I think that's another sort of reward mechanism that could work. But I would be remiss if you wanted to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say that, some other, like two other little habit tips with relationship to rewards. It's like the fact that, like, if you can do a good deed or just get something done at the start of the day, I found it pays dividends throughout the rest of the day and the rest of the week, because it's that reward system. Like, I've done something good, you get that endorphin rush. And so, like, whether it's, writing a nice email to someone, or like picking up some litter on the street, or doing something like that, like, even those little things, they compound and they accumulate over a day. So you feel good about yourself and your mental health. And then I heard about a CEO that, like, treats going to the gym or working out like, like it's a priority. Like, your own physical health should be a priority. What you put in your body, like what you eat, and like how you exercise and keep yourself fit, like those things should be as important as like your mental fitness, and they work together. And so making sure I go to the gym or do something like that almost every day is essential too. And I think that those are all good things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm so happy you're saying all of that, because it's not some esoteric idea. What we eat and what we drink and what we breathe is that's who we are. That's how what we become, basically. So it's just pure science. And I think that you're absolutely right that our mind completely depends. The brain is a tissue. So what we eat, what we intake, our brain functionality depends on that. So yes, I agree. I actually followed the very similar sort of thought patterns. So, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about, obviously, Sierra Club, because it's also something I want to know. How did you get into the Sierra Club work? Because you're already doing, through your work, a lot of environmental protection. So what drew you to Sierra Club? Why did you want to volunteer? Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. So just curious what got you there. And
so after my stint in Yellowstone, I actually spent a semester in Washington, D.C., and I had the great fortune of getting an internship with Mark Kresowick, who's the Eastern Regional Director of the Beyond Coal campaign.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe I just want to make sure, because some people might not know. I mean, we are so ingrained in Sierra Club that we know references. I just want to make sure that everybody understands. And just really fast, which year was that? What year was
that? Was in 2014, spring of 2014. So before I did my world escapade, but after Yellowstone, I hung out with, and he was probably the deputy regional director at the time. But Beyond Coal campaign is like the largest and one of the most successful environmental campaigns in history. And it also happens to be a campaign of the Sierra Club. So I was working with Mark, and like working in DC was amazing. Like, he was super flexible. I got to go to all kinds of Senate meetings and House meetings, like that meeting that's like notorious in where like senators were speaking up for the climate, like throughout the night, kind of like I got to deliver symbolic coffee to numbers of senators, and it's on my Facebook, but I have photos with all of these different senators, just as like this little old person going to working with the Sierra Club. It was really formative. And when James Inhofe from Oklahoma brought the snowball into the meeting, like I was there for that. Like, and when James Hansen was like presenting on climate change in 2014 to Congress, like I was in the room for that. And I was actually on C-SPAN in the back behind James. And like, it was just kind of cool to be like there. There's so much going on there. and I was afforded so many opportunities to get engaged and get involved and find new sparks of interest, doing some work on the Keystone Pipeline and like really being a part of like the movement building around that. And the Sierra Club, I worked with Mark and Kelly Martin, who's now the head of like the Dirty Fuels campaign. And we were working on coal ash pollution from coal-fired power plants down in North Carolina, but also throughout the United States at one point. And that was amazing. They actually flew me down to North Carolina to do some organizing and get people proxies into the like Duke Energy meeting to speak on behalf of the environment and on clean rivers and healthy populations, because that coal ash was polluting waterways. So that was like,
you mean like their board meeting or what?
Yeah, like their annual shareholder meeting. So we were all in the room for this annual shareholder meeting. It was really interesting. Like that is like, yeah, it was great. That was great work, and working with Allison Chin, who's now I think on the board of the Sierra Club Foundation. But we worked on some of the first diversity, equity, and inclusion meetings for staff in the DC office. And so I just like got pulled into so many cool things. And that was in 2014. And at that point, I really felt like the Sierra Club was a special place. And my admiration for what the Sierra Club really tries to do, it's only grown since. Doing, on the grounds, just grassroots stuff in Chicago as a volunteer, lobbying in Springfield, but also now here, it's like the radical democratic principles of the Sierra Club. It's my understanding it's the only large environmental organization with an all volunteer board that's elected by the membership of the Sierra Club. It's just like that, those types of principles. I love that they walk the walk. And so that's why I'm still, working in different capacities and in different communities, not just the environmental work I do from 9 to 5, but the Sierra Club meetings in the region and in the state afterwards. So after work.
It's amazing. And then, actually, those of you who are Sierra Club members, it is an election season for the board of directors for the national board.
Nice little plug.
Talking about, so please cast your ballot. It's April 22nd, right? Is the cutoff date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very important because they do a lot of work and make a lot of decisions for the club as a whole and for our environment. They're dealing with the federal government, with the federal issue, and the sort of all the way trickling down to the states. So that's great. Any particular projects that you are proud of within Sierra Club that you would want to share?
Yeah, that coal ash work in 2014 was like amazing. But also out here, I think something that really changed my life too was getting appointed to like the National Sierra Club's Climate Adaptation Task Force for the board of directors. And it's just an example, like, right, I'm working with the local Sierra Club group in Marin. I became the treasurer as a volunteer and then was voted on to the XCOM, a year after, maybe, or a year and a half after. And starting at that level and doing good work in my local community, which felt good and built relationships, it translated into working at the regional level on the financial committee with you and others. And
political. I don't want to misrepresent myself. I'm not. Political committee. Is that the one?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I did end up on the political committee. That's right. Political and financial and Fed lands. And then
by my MBA, I would not put myself in the National Financial Committee.
No. The Bay Chapter Finance as just.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But the Climate Adaptation Task Force, it's like I was flown out to DC for a weekend after working with like national experts on these teams and talking about, everything from animal management and like healthy soils to looking at healthy forests and biochar and all these different topics that I got to learn about through these landscape analyses that we did for the board of directors. But then I got to go to DC and meet people from chapters in states as from Hawaii to Kentucky to Florida. And like, we talked on the phone a lot, but like to meet face to face with these folks and realize the vastness of the Sierra Club, but also just the environmental community. Like, we're from all different walks of life and all different communities, and we're all working together, whether we know it or not. We're like partially in sync, and then we get to connect, and like it's just a beautiful thing. And it was something that I was really proud of, and a highlight that I would want to communicate to folks, anyone watching, but anyone who just in general memorializing it, because it's like the fact that you can start as a treasurer in a local group, as a volunteer, not an elected person, and then over the course of a couple of years, you're working on trying to set national policy on climate adaptation for food and ag. It's like, or like anything, it's like, it's pretty phenomenal the way that the opportunities afforded to us.
Yeah, well, and I'm just going to go back to working with you. I see exactly how people would want to work with you, because just the wealth of knowledge and expertise and the experience that you have, and also that very pleasant way of working with people. I see you in many meetings, and you're always very thoughtful, very compassionate, very empathetic. So I think those are the qualities that attract people. And you also laugh, so that's also important, as I say, despite and because of it all. So we definitely, right now, even I think it's certainly difficult times, but there's so many opportunities also. And just I want to remind people that we still have an election coming up, very important, and we also still have a lot of those environmental fights that are happening on the local and the state and the federal level. But your involvement is crucial, because unless elected and appointed people hear from us, they're gonna go with corporations or with special interests that are not necessarily advocating on our behalf and behalf of our health. So I certainly appreciate your thoughtful work in that. And it is like, it is a whole international aspect to your work also that I'm particularly curious about. We're sort of coming, to the end of our conversation. So, but maybe you can mention a little bit also because Sierra Club also, and also a lot of environmental organizations, I think, doing a lot of work in justice, inclusion, diversity, to really advocate for the communities that we represent and where we're located. And we have such a diverse Bay Area. So what did you learn from work in national and also international? Because international work really makes you present to different cultures, different ways of life, and how you can bring them together. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. Well, I think traveling abroad in general makes the world simultaneously feel so much bigger and much more wondrous and exciting. And at the same time, strangely enough, makes it feel so much smaller, like in terms of being able to really connect with people all over the place. And so the fact that I was able to cultivate and maintain now relationships with people and through that international program is humbling. And it's definitely a driver for the work that I do. And it's good to peek outside of our bubbles as much as possible. Because I think the challenges that we face today are very much global. And I think this pandemic is a perfect example. And I think climate change is a perfect example. And what we're learning through these events, especially this pandemic, because it's so visceral right now, but it's the fact that we are confronting and facing the truth that we are so reliant on so many other beings for our own existence and our own subsistence. And I think that is this like universal truth that that for the last couple hundred years has, there have been people who have been proselytizing the opposite, that we're, totally you're operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And so it's I think that's one of the biggest things for me is the fact that like what we're doing here, not only are we creating strategies and tools for people to use elsewhere and inspiration and whatnot, but like there's an actual material effect that our work here, the work in Marin, being the first county in California to be have all municipalities on 100% renewable energy, wind and solar, that's sourced in California. Being the first county to do that has a material effect on my friends elsewhere. So, and then we talk about these things as well. So that's one of the humbling pieces about the international aspect for me.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so thank you for mentioning Marin. I think that we do a lot of work in Bay Area on bringing the renewable energy. And some people, I think, are unaware, going back to your conversation about coal. And, a lot of people are not aware that we have sort of on the two projects, at least, that we're fighting right now against coal terminals. And so we talked about it. It's actually something that even I didn't know, that we have pipes going through the Bay Area, carrying oil. So that's another. So I want to ask you first, is there something that I didn't ask you that you would have loved me to ask and share, something that you think is important?
Yeah, I guess just I think a couple, the two lessons that stand out for anyone that wants to get involved or stay involved with the club or elsewhere is really just honoring. I think for me, it's honoring the fact that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. And like David Brower said, a lot of these battles, there's no permanence. It's just a stay of execution for a lot of these battles. And it's up to us to reaffirm the positions about why we need to defend this park, or why we need to defend this, marine protected area, or anything, for even why we need to have community gardens and have access to parks for all, not just for some, like some of us in Marin. It needs to be for everybody. And we're noticing it through this pandemic as well, with parks being shut down and you can only access local parks. So like, that's one thing. I think the other thing is that it's a lot of it is about endurance and about courage. And I think some of us have these facades, and it's also, it comes with the territory of like social media and branding and things like that, and just putting ourselves out there in certain ways. But it's okay to be terrified or to be scared. And I think part of the next step of that is like, if you can still do something, anything, despite that fear or despite that uncertainty, that's courage. And that is a beautiful thing. And that's worth like treasuring and holding up as like, that's the direction we should be moving, like being uncomfortable, but doing it anyway.
I'm in awe. Thank you. I have, I had goosebumps and sort of teary eyes throughout the interview, because you mentioned so many things that resonate and also awake those emotions, that we are emotional beings and we cannot get away from it. And I think more we actually incorporate that vulnerability and openness and connection with emotion, I think more effective we're going to be as advocates and as environmental, political, whatever your particular passion is. I think that connecting with people on the emotional level is extremely important. Chance, you don't cease to amaze, to surprise me too. So thank you so much. I learned so much. I got inspired. I hope everybody who tuned in to listen to us or will be looking at the recording, learn a lot, and also have bumps like I did. So thank you so much. And I hope we'll continue, maybe do, in a few months again, revisit and see where we all at.
Yeah, it'd be great to. I was just thinking, who gets to interview Olga, right? So yeah.
Well, I interject some stories here and there. That's part of the conversation. So one day. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Please come next Friday also. And Chance, appreciate you and appreciate your work. Thank you.
Yeah,
so
you
much.
too. Thank you for your excellence, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. Excellent teams make excellent leaders. Hold us all to a higher standard.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you next Friday, hopefully at noon, with another fabulous leader from the Sierra Club and new lessons to share. Thank you. Bye.